Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the Endless Runner game tutorial. So in this one we actually create a bridge that never ends. So we dynamically we dynamically create some new bridges as our player moves forward. Just like this if we take a look in the scene. So guys, that's what we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do this episode is we're actually going to create a new game object, a empty one. So that's Ctrl-Shift-N on the keyboard, or create empty. Now we're going to change the name of that game object for Tile Manager. Make sure that we've put it in the center of the world, so 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete every single bridges I had before. Now this Tile Manager is going to take care of spawning those. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create a new script. Now you either add it by using the add component here, or you can create a new script. So create C# and call it Tile Manager. Make sure that this Tile Manager script is on your object. So drag and drop. And then we're going to open it up inside of MonoDevelop. And again, we've got a script for us to use. Okay, so the first thing that this Tile Manager needs to know is what exactly is he allowed to spawn. So in order to feed him that data, I am going to create a public, this is a public field, public game object array like this, and I'm going to call this tile prefabs. Now if we take a look, if we just save this, Ctrl S, and we have a look at our Tile Manager now, there is now an array over here that is called tile prefab. And since we see it, let's go ahead and just set it real quick. So I'm not sure how many prefab you've created from last episode, but in my case I have 3, and that's enough for me to test. So what I'll be saying is my tile prefab array size is going to be of 3. Now this is going to create 3 elements down here, and I can simply drag and drop every single bridges I've made. Now I've made sure that the first one is the normal bridge, so the one that has nothing on it, the clean one. And you'll understand why in a moment, but you don't really have to do it, but it's just going to be good practice for the future. So guys, this is now my tile prefab. And we haven't done anything yet in the script, but at least now he knows what he's allowed to spawn. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is actually have a reference to the player, because the player is actually moving in the map and he is the one that triggers that, okay, we're going to create a new tile and let's delete the old one as well. So based on the player position, we're going to be able to tell, is it the moment to create a new tile? Else we could be spawning the whole level in one go, but that would be just you'd get a out of memory exception because it goes towards infinity. So guys, we're going to be spawning this at the runtime. In order to do that, we're going to keep track of the player. So what I'd like to do is up here, I'll declare a private transform, and this is going to be the player transform. Now the same exact way we did for the camera, we're going to say player transform is equal to GameObject.find GameObject with tag, and we're looking at the player tag like this. And since we want the transform, we're going to say dot transform. Okay, but before we can actually use this, we're going to need some more information on where do we exactly want to spawn the object. So we'll need some more fields up here. Let's start with a private float that we'll call spawn z, which is going to stand for where in z exactly should we spawn this object, because it's always on the same x, it's always on the same y. Where exactly in z do we want to be putting this object? Okay, and then we'll also need to know what length is the object. So private float tile length, and mine is 12. Yours is probably different, but my bridge length is 12. If you remember right here, we've did a little bit of calculation, so that's the first one. And if I want to put one after that, I gotta be putting it at 12, like so. And also one more information we'd like to save is how many tiles do we want to have on the screen. Now that could be depending on your machine, but since I want to push this on the phone and my bridge are they're not high polygon, but they're not low poly as well, I'm gonna make sure it is quite a small one, so maybe about 7 tiles. So private int amount of tiles on screen is equal to 7. Now you don't have to put the .0f because this is a int value. We don't need any decimal number in that. Okay. Now with all of this information, we are going to go ahead and create a new function. A function that whenever we call it, it is simply going to spawn a tile. It's not going to ask any question, just simply go ahead and spawn me a tile. Now, we could be saying down here under the update, void spawn tile. Now what I like to do when I declare function is say private void, so you'd like to declare the type, and not the type, but the security level in front. And I haven't done it because Unity by default gives us the function already made like this, but that's usually what I do. It's just something I like to do. So private void spawn tile, and this is going to take in parameter a prefab index that I'll be putting on -1 by default, and again you'll understand why in a moment. Now what I'd like to do is whenever I call this function, say from the start maybe, I want to be able to say, okay, so spawn me the prefab at the index 0, like this. This would actually spawn the first prefab. I'm going to remove it for now. But if I don't send any values, I just say spawn tile like this without sending it any values, any int in there, so no 0, this is actually going to do something else. Because by default it's going to say, okay, so prefab index is equal to -1, and then we can do a different logic based on that. But that logic is going to be done in a next episode. In this one, let's just go ahead and focus on creating some tiles when we walk, or I mean run. Okay, so back on creating that tile, the first thing we'll need is a game object of values. So game object that I'll call Geo right here. So now we've got our game object. We're gonna say Geo is equal to instantiate tile prefab at the index 0 for now, because we don't really do the random just yet. So let's just go ahead and spawn the first one right now, and we spawn it as a game object. Okay, so once our object is created, what I'd like to do is say go.transform.setParent to my own transform. Now just imagine we create a new bridge like this. So just like in our hierarchy right now, we create a new bridge, it goes here, everything is well, but eventually our scene is going to look like that, and that's not very appealing. What we'd like to do is whenever we create this object, we grab a reference to it, so that's Geo right here, and then we say your parent is now going to be tile manager parent. So every single bridge is going to be spawned under this object, under the tile manager. Now after that, we're going to go ahead and just move our bridge. So go.transform, the transform of the object we've just created, .position is equal to vector3.forward, which is equivalent of writing new vector3 0, 0, 1 times spawn z, like this. And then once we're done spawning that tile, we can go ahead and say spawn z is now plus equal to tile length. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, just to test it out, we're gonna put some spawn tile in the start. Let's just go ahead and just spam this maybe 3 times or 4 times. So right now our scene is empty, but once we press play, spawn tile should be called 4 times. If we press play, as you can tell, we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 bridge. But we're never going to be coming back inside of this function, so at one point we're going to run out of tiles. Now what I'd like to say up here in the start is we are going to create a for loop. So for int I is equal to 0 as long as I is oops, as long as I is smaller than the amount of tiles on the screen, I++. So how many tiles right now are we spawning? I think it's 7, so 7. This for loop, this statement right here that we're going to write, is going to be called 7 times. So let's just put spawn tile in there. Okay, so that doesn't fix the problem, but now we know that there should be 7 tiles on the screen, and here they are. Like this. But eventually, we're going to run out. And that's what we need to fix. So inside of the update, we're going to go write some code. We are going to say if player transform.position.z, so the current position of the player right now on the z-axis is bigger than spawn z minus the amount of tiles on the screen times tile length. If that's the case, we are going to go ahead and spawn a new tile, so spawn tile. Now this sounds really confusing like this, and I'll explain the code in a moment, but let's just make sure it works. So as you can tell, our player, every time he crosses a new bridge, he instantiates a new one. And then if we turn this off, we can still see it in the back, but eventually we're going to have some fog and we won't be able to see everything. Now if you'd like this to be shorter, then you can go ahead and just crank down the amount of tiles on the screen, so maybe 3. That's way too low, but we can work with that. As you can tell, we pretty much just spawn the thing as we proceed on the map. Of course, we're not deleting it. We are not generating a random one. It's always the first one, the clean bridge. But we can fix that in the next episode. So guys, that pretty much concludes it for this episode, and if you enjoyed this or if you learned something, please leave me a like, really appreciate that. If you have any question or comment, you can leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Other than that, subscribe for more, there will be more coming soon, and guys, I will be seeing you in the next episode.